companies spend so much on ERP.
Yeah, definitely.
And you got to question, when do you start to get the value? And you get the value when you make people's lives easier.
Welcome to the Maitsys podcast. Today we have none other than the special guest, Nick Jackson, Global SAP Director at H.B. Fuller, with over 20 plus years of experience in SAP S4HANA, ERP transformation, and strategic innovation. Super excited for today's conversation. Thank you, Nick, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So yeah, let's get right into it. Let's have you share a little bit about your professional journey and what led you to your current role.
Yeah, from a professional aspect, I've been now in this space for 20 plus years and have worked through at the bottom level all the way to the top. I've led large scale global teams as small as 3 all the way up to 150 plus for a variety of companies, consumer product base, automotive base, as well as industrials and chemicals. What has led me to where I'm at right now in my career is a very simple ethos, is that you don't have to make IT complicated, you don't have to make SAP complicated. And you need to really look at it from a perspective of the end user. And that's not cliche, people say that a lot of times, it's always what's the end user say, but it really is what makes the difference in being successful. How I came about to be at H.B. Fuller was kind of the stars aligned. It was the COVID timeframe. They were going through a little bit of how do they reboot their ERP program. They were looking for someone to come in with global experience to kind of lead them and shepherd them into the next phase. And I didn't go through a recruiter. I was as bold as I emailed the CIO directly and said, I think I'm your right candidate.
Wow, let's go.
And so for 4 years later, here I am on a great journey with them of where we literally in the 4 years, we've doubled, almost 2.5 the size that's on SAP from a company perspective, globally over 50 plants, 70 shipping points, 24/7 operations, and we just recently completed our S4 RISE migration. So we have done a lot, and we still have some to go, but the end is in sight, which is what I like to think about, the end.
Yeah, and for the folks at home who don't know, that's a huge accomplishment. So yeah, I guess, how has your background in IT and business transformation shaped your approach to leadership?
Yeah, growing up, I'll go back to a little bit of how I grew up, and I think that's what started me is I grew up in a small business family. So I started working at the age of 14.
Okay.
And one of the things my father stressed to me was it was a full service automotive station.
Okay.
So, which means I was out there pumping gas.
Nice.
And I made it very transactional the first couple of times to where it was just like, what do you want? Let me give you the money, in and out. And he stopped me one Saturday and said, you need to connect. You need to talk to the customer. And I'm like, well, isn't the name of the game to get as many through as possible? And he said, yes, that's the name of the game, but the name of the game is to keep them happy so they come back as well. And so I've always taken that lesson when I start as, my leadership style is to understand first, seek to understand and connect with them of where they're at and speak to them in terms of where they're at. If you come in and you have your jargon, which we all do in the ERP space, we quote these acronyms, but if you don't relate it to them, so my leadership style is like to relate. And then for my direct reports and my team within me, I basically say, look, you're at a point in your career where I'm not running a daycare. You yourself can manage yourself. I'm going to give you the goal, the objective. You manage yourself to there. And then along the way, I'm here to clear the obstacles for you, right? For you to be successful. If you fail, obviously I'm going to help you correct it and course correct it. But by and large, you have a lot of autonomy. And I think that helps people feel a sense of ownership when they deliver.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. Could you walk us through the scale and scope of your recent S4HANA migration project?
Yeah, scale and scope. So it is a global instance. Give you some statistics for the SAP nerds out there. 75 plus company codes, 50 plus plants, 70 shipping points around the world, 24/7 operation, about 3,200 users. As I like to say, we're in every continent and we're running SAP in every continent except for Antarctica at this point.
Wow.
So that's the scope. And to think, how I relate it to another way of thinking of scope and scale and is with a manufacturing network of 50 plus plants, one goes down, you can shift easily. You're going to take the core ERP transactional system off. There is no backup. So the margin for error is very small. So when we did our conversion, we did take, our company offline for 50 hours.
Oh, wow.
So it's basically, Friday we're shutting down and you're going to come back Sunday night and it's going to work. And that's the scale and scope of it. It is a full-fledged, implementation from the standpoint of we're using all the core modules. Plus we have, PLM in place, 80 plus interfaces, multiple languages, multiple users, 24/7 operations. So it's a pretty healthy size. The team that supports it, my internal COE that does an excellent job, they're based around the world. We have about 60 individuals in-house that support it from a technical perspective all the way through to a functional perspective.
The sun never sets on Nick's SAP empire.
It never does set. I mean, and that's good and bad, I will say. I enjoy the early morning conference calls. Sometimes the evening ones are painful.
Yeah.
But the sun never does set for my team. We are a 24/7 shop.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What were the biggest challenges you faced during this migration and how did you overcome them?
Yeah. I think it's important to understand our approach was a brownfield approach.
Yeah.
And so, in a brownfield approach, you're basically upgrading your system and then you have to take on the enhancements that are required because you're upgrading to S4. But, the biggest challenge for me was scope. Because when you get the sales job for S4, you get all the bells and whistles. Everybody wants all these new things with it. But our scope was very tight because we need to keep our risk profile. So keeping scope management, which is basic of anything, was important. The other challenges we came into was while we were on the deployment implementation upgrade path, we were still doing concurrent implementations of new sites coming on at the same time.
Wow.
So my code freeze on about a 9-month endeavor really didn't start till about 4 to 5 months till go live. So we were doing a lot of dual maintenance, a lot of checks and balances, making sure things were in order. Adds a certain amount of different risk to it, but it's all doable if you plan it out. And so challenges were scope, making sure we kept systems in sync, and then the other thing is stakeholder management. Everyone's nervous whenever you say, hey, I'm going to take all your systems down from an SAP perspective. So how do you keep them informed, and how do you keep them informed at the right level so that they feel comfortable? If you go in there and get into the technical details, they get lost.
Right.
So you have to equate everything back to the business. And I coined a term, we need to Fisher price it. We need to make it as simple as Fisher Price, right? We got to be able to look at it and explain it in a very simple way of what we're doing, but still need to get the gravity of the magnitude of change through.
And I want to ask, what's the most appropriate cadence when, keeping up with stakeholders?
Yeah, so I have several stakeholders that I have to keep informed, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And so if I talk for my executive steering committee, and these would be the C levels.
Yeah.
That's monthly. So
Okay.
every month we're in there. It's the third Thursday of every month.
Okay.
For what we call more of a local steer code. So when we have a deployment or we have a project of this, we form another steering team that has more direct control over it. We meet with them every other week.
Okay.
And that's because more of the decision making is at that level, right? The higher you go in the food chain, the more they're away from the decision. So I try to keep the decisions closer to where they need to be at, because these are the people that have to live with it, the local steering team. So a 2-week, every other week cadence is about what I'm on. And then you talk about your team leads and your support teams, that's weekly. We're weekly there. I don't believe in a meeting to death. Like I know a lot of people say, hey, we got to have a morning standing meeting. If my managers want to do that because they think it's important for their area, that's fine. From my perspective, I work with my project manager. We put controls and dials in place that we can monitor it. And it's more not to be effective when you come to a status meeting. I don't want to talk about what has happened.
Right.
I want to talk about what will happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what the stakeholders need to understand is you need to be their Sherpa on the journey.
Right.
And take them to the next step.
And is there a specific framework or point of view that you utilize when addressing scope of a project?
Yeah. I wish there was something I could coin it out. Coin it the Nick Jackson way of scope management, but it's transparency. It's keeping the running log of, hey, this is what we agree upon with scope. And we make sure all the stakeholders are aligned at the very beginning of the journey. And then as changes come to that scope, you have to look at it through the lens of, is this required to run the business? Is this something required for day one?
Mm-hmm.
If it's not required for day one, it needs to go on a log. And then before you exit that decision to go live or before you exit out of hypercare, depending on where you're at, you then need to prioritize those things found along the way. Right. And that way, by that transparency, your stakeholders don't feel like it's a black box. You're holding yourself accountable to, hey, did my team do a good job on the analysis? Because when we find a day one thing comes up, that means we missed something in our fit gap or we missed something along the way, right? We shouldn't have any surprises in what's required to run the business day one. Now, day 95 of when they're on the system, we can predict how they should act, but the thing I can't control are humans. So as they start to work through and they start to optimize inside their processes, they're going to come up with new ways. And we always have to then go back to what are the tenets of our global template.
How did SAP RISE play a role in enabling your transformation at H.B. Fuller?
Yeah. So RISE is I would say a very interesting prop in the marketplace.
Yeah.
It is SAP's foray into being a service offering over an ERP. And for us, I would say our journey into RISE, we weren't afraid. We weren't scared about it because our main ERP was already co-located or hosted by an outside provider. So to us, SAP hosting it was the next evolution.
Mm.
And for us too, we had adopted a cloud-first strategy. We really didn't want to be on an infrastructure. So, going to a cloud-first strategy, going to RISE, was a very valuable prop for us because otherwise we'd have to do that transformation ourselves. And I akin it to, your other SaaS offerings out there like Salesforce. Salesforce runs it. So why wouldn't I have my most critical application? Why wouldn't I want that company running it and doing it? Now, it is, like I said, controversial and it's a little different because the way SAP traditional go-to-market has been, I'll sell you software, you put it on, you host it, you run it. Now I'm taking it over, which means I'm taking the data with it too. And that can get a little uncomfortable conversation, but then I go back to, well, look at all the other SaaS applications you have running in your portfolio. I'm going to be very shocked if there probably is companies, but I'll be very shocked if there's companies that don't have SaaS offerings today in their application portfolio.
Right.
So RISE played an interesting role just from the standpoint of it's, the service offering where it takes care of infrastructure, basis service, plus the licensing, couples it all together. Plus also that makes them very much part of the migration because you're going into their data center. So I'm getting their best people helping me do it. Versus if I'm doing it myself, I'm going with an SI on the street that may not have all the insight. But SAP Service and Delivery, they have the insight. It's their product. They know how to optimize it, work with them. So it for me, I think it's a very compelling case. I know a lot of companies that are on their S4 journey right now are thinking about it. And I have a lot of people ask me about it, and I kind of say, I've been happy with it.
That's good.
Very happy.
Yeah, I think you, from an outsider perspective, people might say that you have more faith than a lot of customers that use SAP and RISE, but it seems like it's been a fruitful journey and it's been advantageous for you to get to where you're at. Utilizing it.
Yeah, and SAP has to make this successful. If they don't figure out how to make that step into service offering with their software, they're not going to be relevant in the space. And so they have to make it work. There's been forays in the past into hosting. Some people will know the term HEC. out there, that for those that are talking more, again, jargon of the industry, but they have to make this work, because otherwise they're going to be irrelevant in the marketplace. Because, CIOs are struggling with, do I want to continue to invest my capital dollars into hardware and services? But as you grow as a company, cloud gives you that ability to turn it on, turn it down, control my spend. So you look at that, if I can take my infrastructure out, have capacity at my fingertips, it's a very interesting value proposition for me, especially in a company that has a heavy acquisition strategy like Fuller does.
Yeah, that makes sense. What key lessons or best practices would you share with other IT leaders embarking on a similar migration journey?
Yeah, you get out there and you do your research. There's always tons of best practices and things that people are. And I always have told my team that best practice is just someone's great idea on how to figure out a problem. But if I really look at like the lessons learned along the way, first off is understand your roles and responsibilities between your migration team and your internal team. Because SAP comes with their service offering, and they're going to come with their playbook.
Right.
You have your team that is going to be at various different levels of education. So getting them really understanding, okay, what am I going to do versus what you're going to do? You got to get that established day one. The other aspect I would say from lessons learned is understand the dress rehearsals and what is exactly the expectations you have versus what they have. So for me, we did 4 dress rehearsals. And so this is where we actually did a 24/7 clock system conversion, start to finish. But, SAP's best practice says 2. So, I'm going 2 extra.
Right.
So again, when we got to that in the plan, it's like, hey guys, you've known all along I want 4 dress rehearsals. Now you're telling me 2 is all I got in the contract. So figure that out up front. And then I would say the last best practice, and it's a very simple thing, but have clear definition of what success looks like when you turn the system over from them. So we developed internally, my team did, here is the checklist of everything before we want to take the system. This is everything we expect to see.
Okay.
And very well documented out and very shared up front with SAP. But I think those 3 things are key. Along the way, you'll run into your technical hurdles, your technical challenges. Those can all be solved. All technical problems can be solved, in my opinion. But what you can solve is miscommunication, misalignment, and being clear of what start and stop is. You have to have those crystal clear to be successful.
Yeah, certainly. That makes sense. How do you balance technical challenges, like we just discussed a little bit, with organizational change management in large-scale projects?
Yeah, OCM. We could probably talk for days about organizational change management.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to the ERP space. The approach, and I'm blessed that I have a dedicated OCM leader that reports to me. And he does a really great job. So does my project manager. They both do great jobs, and those are key to managing it. But from an OCM perspective, you really have to understand how the change is going to impact them. And that, again, these are cliche things, but when we look at changing out a piece of software, when you look at implementing someone onto an ERP, what are they going to start doing, stop doing, and have to continue doing in their day-to-day jobs? These are very basic, and what I tell people from an OCM perspective is every day you wake up, you brush your teeth with your right hand.
Yeah.
I put you on a new system. I essentially have told you, brush your teeth, but use your left hand. You're going to get the job done, but you're not going to be as effective.
Right.
And therefore, people get frustrated. So from an OCM perspective, it's how do we take the temperature and the frustration down before the actual event happens? Because they'll be successful. They know how to use the system. So you have your OCM, which is people. Then you have your technical. So technical always comes with a palace of, this is how this should be. This is how the end user should operate with it. Why are we changing it, right? This is how the software should work. I go back to, okay, great. Let's step out from a technical perspective.
Okay.
and let's go sit and talk with the end user
Okay.
and understand their point of view. Whenever a developer tells me this is how the perfect way is to take a sales order, or this is the perfect way to do something, I always say, have you tried to perform their function? No. If you haven't tried to perform their function yet, go out there, because change management is making them feel like they're also part of the solution. And you got to change it from, what are you doing to enable me versus what are you doing to me? And these are very slight words,
Right.
but they make a big difference when you're dealing with your user community.
Yeah, certainly. That was a great analogy. The toothbrushes. I'm still thinking about it. But no, that's very important that you do put the technical resource in the shoes of the business stakeholder to align expectations, and all around just align expectations. I think is the name of the game, right?
It is. And a lot of my job is just that, aligning expectations. I enjoy the technical side of it, and I could geek out, so to speak, on technical, but 80% of my job is just stakeholder alignment. But that's what I have to do to make sure my team can deliver.
Right.
Because they're well versed in the technical, and while I like to still think I can do technical, my skill set has taken me now to stakeholder alignment, which is just the evolution of where you're at in my ERP career.
Definitely. What strategies do you use to ensure alignment between IT initiatives and overall business goals?
Yeah, I always start with whenever someone says, that's an IT problem, I always worry about it. Or whenever there's a management meeting and IT's off to the side, that scares me. When I worked at Stanley Security Solutions, I interviewed with the president of the division for my director role. He said, how does IT align with the business? A very, very similar question. And I said a couple of things, and this is a couple of my philosophy about IT. One, when you want to go do a business project, my department should never be a hindrance. Two, things like PCs, phones, network, those should always work. Those are table stakes. And third, when we're done with the project, we should just fade right away. And those three very simple things, though, to get those three very simple things done requires me to have to partner with the business. And it's not partner like you and I sitting around the table. It's like, I need to join your leadership staff. I'm going to put my manufacturing guy in the operations leadership staff. You have a quarterly meeting, they're going to be there.
Right.
They're on the agenda. They're going to present the state of IT. And so alignment with that, and also then aligning our delivery of solutions to what are the corporate priorities. If it doesn't align with the corporate priority, why are we doing it?
Right.
And there's always things that you're going to have from an IT perspective, what I like to call health and hygiene. Patching, but even from there, those align to the corporation, because if we're not keeping healthy systems, they can't go meet their objective. So again, it's getting IT to view themselves, they are the business, they are part of the business. And in many aspects, they know the business better than the business because they can look at it without silos. They see it from a digital perspective. They see how the piece of data starts all the way over here and goes all the way over here. They know the digital thread. Right. But they need to have the ability to voice that and to partner with. And that's what it is about. It's just partnering and understanding what are their objectives, what are my objectives, and aligning to them.
And I think over the last decade especially, we're going to start to see more, but over the last decade, I think IT has grown a prevalence in that boardroom. And people are starting to understand what health and hygiene really is, what aligning IT can do to take the company to the next level, and everything in between.
I agree. IT is a great enabler if used correctly.
Correct. Yeah, definitely. You've spoken about digital transformation and continuous improvement. How do you foster a culture of innovation within your teams?
Yeah. So we're how do you foster innovation within your team is always a delicate balance, because you have your delivery schedule. But you also want to make sure you're continuing their education and they're growing and doing it. So I tend to start with what are my pain points. So I look, I sit down at the end of the year or going into next year and I say, these were the pain points of my customers this past year.
Okay.
And from reporting to interaction to how do I approve a purchase record, these were pain points. Do the ticket analysis, do all the metrics I can look at. And then it's, okay, no one's asking us to go fix that. Team, I'm going to give you this problem. Go innovate. Go tell us how we can solve it. Come back and bring me back solutions. To me, innovation in IT is about how do you answer the unarticulated needs of your customer? Because your customer's going to tell you what they want, but they don't tell you their unarticulated needs. And those unarticulated needs means you have to innovate within the solution set.
Yeah.
So that's how I drive my team to do it. I say, hey, these were our problems last year. Let's solve them. And then let's go one step forward and just keep moving one step forward.
Yeah, turning over those hard to move stones.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They don't got to be turned all the way over. Just get a little light on them sometimes.
Yeah, and then naturally the water will start pushing through.
Yeah.
That makes sense. What role does collaboration play in achieving IT and business success? I know we've touched on it on multiple other points, but I'd like to have you touch on it even more.
Yeah, collaboration is the key to success in IT. You can look at IT departments around the world, IT as a service, and if you're not collaborating with your business at where your business is at, you're going to fail. You have to be able to collaborate with them, and that means talking the language of the business. If you and I sat down and never established a lexicon between us, we're going to constantly be talking over each other.
Right.
And we're never going to collaborate and win together. So
right.
IT has to be humble
to
say, I want to understand your business, your needs and objectives, and present them back to them in their language. Now, along the way, you can educate them to your jargon, your language, but that's how you build the collaborations. They need to build trust with you. This person has a vested interest in my success. I trust that they're going to do it. I see them working for me. I see that starts to build the collaboration up, and then that ultimately brings you to the IT success.
Yeah, certainly. How do you envision the future of ERP systems evolving, especially in the context of SAP's shift towards the subscription model?
Yeah, ERP's evolving. They evolve all the time. Again, this is one person's view of the world. In the SAP space, you talk about we still have private and public clouds, and a lot of these S4 migrations are going to private cloud. Where I see SAP evolving, especially ERPs in general, is they're going to have to start getting more and more back to a consistent data model, consistent processes to roll innovation out. If the software is not used like the company next door or the company over there, you can't deliver to market faster innovations. You can't ultimately use AI effectively because everyone has a different data model that they're working with. So I see ERPs trying to take it back to say, okay, we want to control more of the data from a standard standpoint. We want to control more of the customizations you can do. We're going to give you an avenue to do your customizations that are outside the core ERP aspect, but we need the core to become more and more consistent from customer to customer. So I see ERPs trying to almost go back to, how do I take it back to standard, which means a lot of people say, I've spent a lot of time making this process work effectively.
Yeah.
But then you have to think of what the benefits are. And the benefits are faster innovation from your provider.
Yep.
Upgrade cycles become easier. And then on top of that, you venture into your AI, your next level tools. Right.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense, because especially if you want to take like an approach of implementing the new, S4 on Rise, there's so many folks that did those customizations at the time were relevant or needed to happen, but with today's technology, it just doesn't make too much sense, right?
No, it doesn't. And I, you and I were talking before this. I said, look, business is business. There's a need.
Yeah.
There's a fill. There's a collection of cash. Business is business.
Yeah.
What makes a business unique is how they go to market, how their intellectual property. Those things can be in your ERP, but more than likely they're not in your ERP. Your ERP is a transactional ledger of what's going on. And at the end of the day, it's need, fulfill, collect cash.
Yeah.
It doesn't get more basic than that.
Yeah, you're right. Looking back on your career, what are some pivotal moments that shaped your leadership style?
Yeah, pivotal moments that have shaped my leadership style. I have been blessed to, in my career, always be surrounded by great mentors and by colleagues that have worked with me and invested in me to where now I'm investing in the next generation. But if I think of some pivotal moments, I would say right out of college when I started my ERP journey or started in the SAP space, I had a director who spent time with me and really tried to forced me to understand the business and not just come with a technical solution.
Okay.
He forced me, and also at the same time, he forced me to stay technical prowess. And I watched him many times go into a room, be able to sell the solution to them in their language, but in the next meeting, he's reading code with me and doing configuration. And I admired that he was able to pivot up and down, but it taught me a valuable lesson. So that's a pivotal thing that shaped my career. And I would say the other pivotal moment for me is I was blessed to take a journey outside IT and do sales and operations planning for a company.
Mm-hmm.
I did that for a year, and I had to be a customer of IT.
Mm.
And it made me understand how difficult at times it is to work with IT. and I'm like, can't we just do this? I get it, but can't we just do this? So, out of that, it became, I want my IT departments to be frictionless. I want that frictionless experience because at the end of the day, people that consume things, it's no different than self-checkout at your local Target or your grocery store. Why do people go use them? Well, some cases it's the only alternative, but it's because I want the fastest experience with the least amount I have to put out to get what I want done.
Right.
If you go to a checkout person, they're going to have a conversation with you. They're going to be slow at bagging. There's going to be the collection and transition of cash.
Yeah.
But if I go self, I'm controlling the pace. It's frictionless. And to me, whenever I see self-checkout, I'm like, this is the lowest amount of effort I have to put out to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
So when I think about my IT staff, it's like, I want my customers to put out the lowest amount of effort when they interact with us for us to be successful together.
Yeah.
So I would say the frictionless, understanding how to make IT frictionless, and then understanding how to talk up and down the management chain effectively.
Yeah, that story that you shared really resonated with me because I had a similar experience with one of my mentors at the beginning of my career where he was able to translate what challenges and requirements I was trying to get and push forward with his experience and knowledge in the industry, and being able to see him translate that kind of bridged the gap in my mind and say, wow, it was like an aha moment.
Yeah.
I could be him if I just understand better.
Right. And now I look at it and it's like, I am him and I'm him plus all my experiences along the way. But is it the right way? I don't know. You never know what's right or wrong, but it's the way it's worked for me.
Yeah.
And again, nothing happens by chance. Everything intersects for a reason.
Yeah.
And I was placed underneath him for a reason.
Yeah.
And now I take that with me and now I pay it forward.
Hey.
That's how you keep it going.
That's it. To hell with right or wrong. Everything happens for a reason.
Yep.
What advice would you give to aspiring IT leaders and professionals looking to make a mark in the ERP space?
Obviously the game has changed from when I started out 20 plus years ago to where it's at today. And we definitely live in an app world of iPhones where consumer IT now indicates so much of the business IT experience. But the advice I would give IT leaders starting out is invest in yourself.
Mm.
And things that I've done over my career to invest in myself is I have a career coach.
Okay.
I constantly push myself to keep up on the trade.
Okay.
The trade magazines. I constantly am looking at in my market space for my company, what are my competitors doing?
Right.
Those are the things that make you better and more of an asset to your business partner.
Right.
So, those leaders that want to do it, you have to invest in yourself and you have to self-advocate.
Mm.
And, Richard Branson says, fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree with that all the time because I've had some people fake it and they've never quite made it. But I do think you gotta advocate for yourself, and you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, definitely.
If you're comfortable, you've stopped growing.
Yeah.
And when I see people that work for me that I can tell they've become comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
they've hit the plateau. It's now time to make them uncomfortable to see if they can grow and stretch them to the next level. So understand investment in yourself, advocate, and be okay with being uncomfortable.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And that'll definitely translate to all areas of life. I know we're keeping the conversation strict to career in SAP, but certainly some drops of wisdom Nick's sharing with us for all parts of our life. In one of your LinkedIn posts, you likened your migration journey to a Star Trek mission. Can you elaborate on that analogy?
Yeah, one of the things I like to do is monthly I have a goal for myself to publish some type of thought leadership on LinkedIn about various topics in IT.
Okay.
And again, it's not that I want to say I'm the expert or the thought leader or things of that nature. Obviously I do, but some of it's therapeutic and it helps me with that investment in myself.
Yeah.
Pick a topic I don't know a lot about, understand it, and then be able to explain it. It's that investment in yourself. And so I'm a sci-fi fan. Most people in the IT space are sci-fi fans. And you talk a lot about, Star Trek's my go-to whenever I'm stressed. But, Hitchhiker Guide's one of them that people talk to. And I said, look, how do I take my recent experience and give it to somebody in a comical way that they can relate to, and yet get across what's important about the mission and how do you navigate through it. So I used like a Hitchhiker Guide approach to it.
Yeah.
And I started out with a captain's log, because it resets the mindset of the readers, in my opinion. If it sits down and it's just here's the 10 things you need to do to be successful in S4 migration. Oh, okay, I understand it, but I need context. Help me relate it to what it is. So that's kind of, why I have that perspective is not everyone is going to be as technical as you.
Yeah.
Not everyone's going to be as advanced as you. And sometimes you have to shake people up to get them to really understand it.
Definitely. And it definitely keeps the user engaged because personally speaking, I follow tons of ERP strategists, SAP specialists on LinkedIn. Sometimes their content gets boring, but every time, like for example, that specific post, I took a second look at it and I really read through it because it resonated with me. It was different. And I know you'd start with a captain's log, but if you were to write a hitchhiker's guide to S4 HANA, what would be your top 3 chapters?
Make sure you have the ship in order.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Don't spend the time to get the ship in order, which means get your house in order, right? Okay. Spend time to build the map.
Yeah.
Know where you're going. Door in the backpack, but really you got to have a map of where you're going and know along the way where it is. And then I think finally it is, what are you going to do along the way to keep the team going? Because there's going to be late nights.
Yeah.
There's going to be frustration. Yeah. And all IT people, we love the superhero syndrome, so I like to call it. I prefer not to reward the superhero syndrome, but it always happens. How are you going to keep that team motivated along the way? What are you going to do for the team? Keep your crew happy and in order. Keep the morale up. If your team doesn't feel like they're going to win, you're not going to be successful. So those would be the 3 I'd look at there is, get the house in order, the map, and what are you going to do for your team to keep them engaged and the morale up? Yeah. It's a long journey.
Yeah, certainly. How do you see the role of IT leaders evolving in the next 5 to 10 years?
I see IT leaders getting closer and closer to the top, closer and closer to the CEO-ship.
Let's go.
I think there's a path for a CIO to become a CEO.
Yeah, definitely.
I really do. I think what you're going to see is you're going to start to see IT leaders have to start to take control of more of the basis of the business from standpoints of data, processes, and overall just reporting architecture, what's reported. I think you're going to see an IT have to play more and more of a role in that because technology is changing faster than we can comprehend it, A. B, we're well positioned to understand that digital thread that I talk about from start to finish. And then finally, it's the next evolution. You're not going to be successful in the stock market or in the world or in a corporation unless you're using technology as an advantage because it's a productivity and efficiency saver at the end of the day.
Right.
And so an IT leader needs to understand those tenets of how do you use those effectively. So I see them becoming more and more closer to a COO, more and more closer to that CEO suite. Now, there is a part of, do they start getting more and more into product development, and bring things. There's some companies that have taken their IT department and focused them on product development for innovation. I think those are interesting use cases, and I like to see where it is and where it goes. But I think you'll start to see the CIO become more and more the source of truth. They can look through it and say, this is what we're doing. Because everyone's going to come from a different perspective to solve the problem, but they see it one way. And they don't necessarily have a stake in the game. They just want to get moving forward.
Yeah.
So that's how I see leadership of an IT leader kind of going over the next 5 to 10 years is they're going to have to become more and more closer and know that they could one day have to go run the company.
Yeah. And to expand on that, I'm curious, this is a very difficult, question to answer because there's so many variables and factors that go into it. But what do you think, let's say in the next 5 years at an enterprise level, what the conversion rate from CIO to CEO pipeline would look like and what that delta would look like in the next 5 years?
Yeah, put a percentage on it. I'd like to say like 100%.
Right.
But do I think it's going to be greater than 25%? Yes.
Yeah.
And I think what you'll see is you'll start to see the value that they can bring to help drive revenue cycles, to help drive operational efficiency, to help bring compliance, security. Yeah. They'll bring these attributes to the C-suite that now are requirements to just doing business. And so I think, where you'll have the gap of where they're going to have to close is how do they sell? Yeah. How do they sell outside? Like they could sell internally, but how do you sell to customers? Right? They really need to start understanding that sales cycle. Right. And understanding the product of the company or whatever they're selling, the service. But how's that work? And then how can they do that? How can they stand in front of a customer and say, you have a guarantee that this is going to work successfully? Because at the end of the day, business is a people-to-people relationship at the end of the day.
100%.
Right?
100%.
And you can transact on a website and you can transact all there, but at the end of the day, people still want to be able to know, I can look at you, I can call you, I can trust you.
Definitely.
And so I think that's where the CIO is going to have that, they have to close that gap. Yeah. In the coming years.
From a skill set perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. What emerging technologies are you most excited about and how do you see them influencing ERP systems?
Well, I haven't said the buzzword AI yet quite enough, but I do think AI, I'm excited about AI to a degree. I say to a degree because I think like everything else, it's going to go through a hype curve where we're going to invest heavily in it. We're going to have to understand, did we get the value out of it? Right. And then we're going to reframe the conversation of how we use AI. Right. I akin it to data lakes. A couple years ago or 10 years ago, everyone had to have a data lake. Yeah. Yeah. Who made data lakes work? I'd like to meet the company that made data lakes work, okay? But we all had to have data lakes. Yeah. Now we're coming back through with it and we're understanding, this is what a data lake really means and this is how we use it. So AI excites me. I have seen some things out of AI that makes me excited. I think it does start to take away some of the non-value added activities that our associates do. and we can make them more value add. The other technologies that are emerging that I see is self-healing supply chains. And it kind of goes with the AI a little bit, but being able to, if COVID taught us anything, was that our supply chain, our just-in-time thought processes may not have been the best. So, but the ability now is supply chains are constantly going to be disrupted. That's just now the name of the game. So how do you build a self-healing supply chain that can notice, hey, that container on the water that I'm tracking technology-wise is not going to be at the port when I want it to. So how do I reroute? How do I get it from a different supplier? But how do I do that automatically so that the planner or the associate isn't having to do that because it's going to be moving so rapidly. It's almost have to be self-healing. That excites me. And then finally, I do see, the way users are going to interact with systems and how they're going to interact. I think it's not just going to always be a keyboard and a mouse and a screen. I think augmented reality has a place in business applications.
Okay.
I really do. I think, I've seen some very compelling case studies of users wearing, Google glasses and stuff like that, walking through a warehouse and being able to look and say, I'm going to pick that off the shelf and automatically do the transaction behind, or overlay for a maintenance person. Here's the schematic of it. So I think those are really interesting, and I think it's going to make people rethink of how they interact. It's not always going to have to be a tablet or a keyboard, mouse. It's going to be a wearable.
Yeah.
And it has a place in business applications.
Yeah, definitely. How do you approach fostering resilience and adaptability in IT strategy, especially during unpredictable times?
You have to be adaptable if you're in IT. That's the bottom line. I think we should just call it AIT, sometimes adaptable IT. Now, I think leaders have to be adaptable. But to be adaptable as IT, you have to make your staff adaptable. And, if you think about it, again, put it in the perspective of your team. That person that's doing XYZ tasks today, you come in tomorrow and say, the direction has changed, we need to do this. They have just spent their time doing that, and you're essentially saying, we're going to throw it away. And you got to be resilient to that, you got to be adaptable. So you have to foster within your team, how does this relate to what we're trying to do from a bigger overall picture, right? And whenever I do any type of large scale transformation, or I do any type of implementation, I always talk about, again, that roadmap, going back to Hitchhiker's reference, but in that roadmap, I build off-ramps that say, okay, look, we want to spend X million.
Right.
And it's going to take us X amount of time. But when we get here, we're going to check, is the trajectory still going to get there? Or do we have to change where we're going to have to go? Do we have to change a little bit? Are we here? And then that also gives my stakeholders the option to say, hey, I've invested 20% of the total bill so far, and I'm not seeing the results, or I'm not seeing what I want. We can walk away from it. If you wait till the end, and you're 1 degree off here on day 2, and day 180, you're going to be so far off from reality. Yeah. So it's how do you purposely build those checkpoints in and relate it back to it? I think is critical to be successful in any transformation, any implementation. You got to know where your off ramps are at.
Yeah, definitely. I think we touched on that a little bit off camera earlier too, but that's certainly something that can't be brushed under the rug. Yeah. What criteria do you prioritize when building external teams to support major IT initiatives? Yeah,
great question, because I think a lot of people struggle with in-house versus out-house.
Correct.
As I like to call it.
Yeah.
I have a philosophy.
Okay. Let's hear it.
I think things like development, configuration, they're consumable. They're variable, and I want to turn them on and off as I need them.
Okay.
What I can't turn it on and off that I need is people that understand the architecture and how the solution set works in the business and how this technology comes together. I don't think you're gonna ever be able to outsource that 100%.
Yeah.
But I do think you can outsource some of the services, such as configuration, development, security role authorization, because those are going to ebb and flow to demand.
Yep.
And I look as, corporate America goes through its ebb and flows.
Yep.
If someone comes to me and says, Nick, you got to cut your IT budget by X amount. In IT, depending on how you're set up, that's very hard to do, especially if you have all the licenses in your IT cost center. Because that maintenance is a set cost.
Yeah.
Then you got depreciation, that's a set cost. Your only really variable factor at the end of the day is people.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you get that right balance? I never want to give the architecture away, but I'm willing to say things like development, configuration. I'm willing to say those are a service I can turn on and off, and how do I get it the most cost effectively possible.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. And how important is cultural alignment between external consultants in those workflows and internal teams in ensuring project success?
Critical. It can't, I go back to anytime I've worked with a staff augmentation partner or an offshore, myself, but more importantly my team, we have to invest time in them being successful, and they have to invest time in us being successful.
Right.
So if that's rotating some of those people onto our sites to understand, you have to invest. It's critical to get a cohesive team together from day one. If you start this looking at it like us versus them, it's never going to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to make sure that, in the partnership between your external provider, you have shared common success criteria. Mm-hmm. So, their criteria may come back with, hey, I'm going to give you your SLA in 24 hours on a P1 ticket. And I'm going to say, that's great. I'm not measured that way. How I'm measured is, did we produce and ship when we were supposed to?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So that's how I'm going to measure you. We're going to be measured by the same things. Now, there's service levels in there, and you get all to the agreement. We have to have a common definition of what the success looks like, and it has to be shared together.
Mm.
And it has to be tied to what your internal team is tied to.
Correct.
So that it does start to remove that barrier and become cohesive.
And to even double click on that, is there a way that I'll make sure both parties are aligned, whether that be specific cadence or specific KPIs? I'd like for you to break that down a little more.
Yeah, every partner with you would do a QBR, a quarterly business review.
Yeah. And
I often tell them, if you're only talking to me once a quarter and you're my strategic partner, we have a problem.
Yeah. Definitely.
We just have a problem because something's not right there. I should not just be reviewing this once a quarter.
Yeah.
For me personally, my more strategic partners, we have a standing monthly meeting.
Yep.
Where we get together and we talk about things. But I also have a relationship with them where I'll pick up the phone and text them, or I'll call them. That's what I like to have, that type of cadence with my partners, is to be able to reach out, get a hold of them when I want to, just like I would a team member. Mm-hmm. But we do have formal checkpoints for review that normally take on the form of a QBR. We do have monthly meetings for prioritization and are we delivering the schedule. But again, to me, those are, if they come and spend the time with me telling me we delivered this many tickets, I know that already.
Yeah, of course.
I know that. What I want to know is those things you delivered, why were they late, or how could we have done better to have a better experience? And the other aspect of partners that I think people overlook is they see a wide range of industry. So they can bring a different perspective to the table for you. And that's how you start to build it. Hey, we're trying to solve this problem. I know you can't tell me how my competitor solved it, but how are you seeing the industry solve this problem?
Right.
And bring me solutions to the table.
Definitely. How do you evaluate the long-term impact of partnerships with consulting firms achieving organizational goals?
Yeah, I think, I like an approach with my partnership of, I call it a 2-in-the-box strategy, where I always have 2 strategic partners at the same time.
Okay.
So I create competition. I think if you get solo sourcing, it puts you at a risk.
Definitely.
Puts you at a risk. So I like to keep two going at the same time.
Yeah.
Now that's juggling I have to do,
Yeah.
right? But I think it keeps a little bit of honesty, keeps them engaged.
Mm-hmm.
As far as what's the organizational goals, it does come down to dollars and cents at the end of the day.
Right.
And financial spend, right? And we can look at things of cost per ticket or cost to implement or speed to implement. There's all these metrics that you could put together, but it comes down to cost. What would be my cost to do this in-house?
Mm-hmm.
What's my cost to do a hybrid model, and what's my cost to do a 100% out-house?
Yeah.
And you got to look at those three and understand in-house, may look cheaper on paper,
Mm-hmm.
but comes with how do you churn your staff to get fresh perspective?
Right.
How do you educate them? There's a lot of hidden costs that come with it. Hybrid, you have the fixed cost of your staff,
Mm-hmm.
then you have your variable over your partner. How can I turn them up and down to make sure that we're delivering successfully? You go 100% outhouse, then you're at their mercy, right?
Right.
Right. You can't easily move away
Right.
if you need to. So balancing is how do I get speed, agility, and what's the most cost effective way to service my business?
And I'm going to ask you to switch chairs with me for this next question. But I guess what piece of advice would you give to consulting companies, professional services companies, to make them more attractive to folks like you?
Yeah.
Loaded question.
That's a loaded question.
Very loaded.
That's loaded. First, I'll say, I'll use a term here, it may not resonate worldwide. Don't show me your NASCAR slide. Meaning, don't show me all the logos of everybody you have.
Yeah.
Because you're sitting at the table because I know you're qualified. If you weren't qualified, you wouldn't be sitting at the table.
Yeah.
I've already done enough research on you to know that, so don't come tell me all your qualifications.
Yeah.
You can put in an appendix, but of 20 minutes of an hour meeting spent on that, you've lost my attention span.
Yeah.
So I'd say the first thing, know your customer.
Right.
But
hopefully.
Immediately show me how you're going to create the value proposition.
Mm.
Understand my unarticulated need.
Right.
Understand my problem,
Mm-hmm.
and how are you going to solve it? How are you going to make my life easier?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. I'm trying to make my life easier for the greater good. So as a consulting company, come in, understand the customer, understand what is really the problem they're trying to solve, and get to the heart of that as quick as possible, because that's engaging to them to say, okay, if you took me through 20, 30 minutes of here's my team, here's all we've done, here's my success record, great. How's that going to impact me?
Yeah.
Show me within the first 10 to 15 minutes, this is your problem, this is how we can solve it. Then we get a dialogue going immediately where I can understand them. Do you understand what I'm really talking about? You can understand, hey, maybe we didn't understand that correctly. Then at the end, we can go through the qualifications and why they're the best company. But, those were the things I sitting through many sales pitch I sit through.
Mm.
Those are the things that are kind of my pet peeves.
Right.
Now, whether or not that changes industry, if it does, then I'll be happy. Whether or not, some companies may not like it. And I know there's cold calls and people do that. We're all trying to earn a buck at the end of the day. But, get to what you're trying to solve for me as quick as possible.
Definitely. Yeah.
Because your time's important.
Correct.
My time's important. That's it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So Nick, what's next for you and your team at HB Fuller?
Well, after some well-deserved rest,
Right.
the holiday season, what's next for my team? It is to make sure we get the value out of the asset. And what do I mean by that is, we've taken care of the technical platform. So we've taken that off the table. We now are on a modernized ERP package with S4 HANA. So now how do you start to innovate on top of that and take advantage of what S4 HANA brings to the table? It's a mind shift change for you and your business partner. They're very used to the old world of ERP projects, SAP projects are very monolithic.
Mm-hmm.
Long time, lot of energy. S4 HANA wants to operate and deliver in a more agile methodology with their innovations. It's more plug this into your process, do this. So for me, it's right now is getting each of my functional teams or my process areas start developing a roadmap of what the innovation looks like, and then present that to the business proactively. See if that aligns.
Right.
That's one of the things for us. Like everybody else, we're going to continue our deployments, and we're going to close out to be on one ERP. So that's what the future is. It's getting the innovation, starting to get the value. I think companies spend so much on ERP.
Yeah, definitely.
And you got to question, when do you start to get the value? And you get the value when you make people's lives easier. And that's the value, right? You're always going to be able to close the books. You're always going to be able to be compliant and all these things. Those are table stakes in the game. But making someone's life easier, that's value. That's value when you can get down to, this clerk on this production line is happier today because we made their life easier through innovation, and they're going to produce better because they're in a better environment. If they immediately go down and they have the mindset, that stupid system, and I got to do all this.
Yeah.
I've ruined their day. So I got to take that away, right? I got to innovate. I got to make it seamless, frictionless for them at the end of the day. So that's where we're kind of focused now is how do we start to really turn it up from as easy as, hey, I want to be able to approve my purchase requisitions on my cell phone versus having to log in. Small, but that's a big win for my business partners.
Definitely. That makes sense. And it's important to my audience that I ask you this, but what was the criteria involved in making the decision between private and public cloud on your journey to S4 HANA?
Yeah, so I would start by saying SAP's public cloud offering is robust.
Okay.
First off, is robust. I think it's marketed now under Grow. Robust, it's there. It is as full-fledged as any ERP or as your existing ERP is for SAP, and the private version, I guess I would say. For us, it was our risk profile. We didn't want to change our end users' experience a lot. We wanted to have our historical data, and we believed, and when people believe things, it's hard to change it, but their belief was that our customizations we did have were critical for our business. That takes you more to a private cloud offering. But even in a private cloud offering, there's this clean core concept where SAP is going to want you to take the core back to some type of standard or some type of methodology and move your developments into the BTP platform. So while I'm private, I'm starting to act like I'm in a public cloud. Now, if my business had came to me and said, we don't care about historical data, we don't care about the end user experience, and we want to get on as fast as possible, public cloud starts to look very advantageous, right? You take your process, you go in, you flip your switches, you pour over some master data, you bring it up. But you're changing how everybody interacts with the system. You don't have historicals, and it's a bigger risk profile, right? So that was the criteria for us.
That makes sense. Now, Nick, how can listeners connect with you and learn more about your work after this podcast?
Yeah, I say the best way is LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'm an advocate on LinkedIn. I'm up there a lot, and please reach out, send me a message, then we can connect. I used to have scheduled on there, hey, let's do a virtual coffee.
Okay.
And you could schedule time with me. The problem is I could never get it integrated with all my calendars. So it became a problem for me. But, please reach out to me. I think everyone in industry needs to network.
Yeah.
And they need to just get different perspectives. And I'll learn something, you'll learn something, and hopefully we can be successful together. So just reach out to me on LinkedIn.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Nick, it's been a pleasure. I'm very happy that you joined us today. And I think the viewers are going to agree on your beautiful journey to S4 and beyond.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.